Gilligan's Island looks deceptively simple. 7 castaways, a sinking boat, and a tropical island with no way home. But behind that cheerful premise lies a story far stranger than anything that aired on screen. Hidden production secrets, cast tensions that nearly derailed the show before launch, and decisions that quietly shaped television history. This was no ordinary comedy. 3 seasons on air somehow turned into decades of cultural reach. And it all starts with a secret that stayed buried for nearly 30 years, a beginning so different that most fans had no idea it even existed. Number 1. The pilot nobody saw for 30 years. Before a single episode reached living rooms across America, a version of this show already existed, one that most fans would never see. The original pilot was filmed in 1963, well ahead of the series premiere, and it featured a cast and tone that felt noticeably different from what audiences would eventually come to love. CBS took one look at the footage and rejected it, deciding the show needed significant changes before it was ready for broadcast. What made it different wasn't just the casting. The overall feel was rougher, less polished, and missing some of the characters that would later define the series. Rather than reshoot everything from scratch, the network held the footage in storage while they reworked the format. The pilot didn't disappear, but it didn't see the light of day in any official capacity for a very long time. It wasn't until 1992, nearly 3 decades later, that the original pilot finally aired. Fans who had grown up watching reruns suddenly discovered that the show they thought they knew had a hidden origin. Seeing it for the first time was a strange experience, familiar in some ways, yet unmistakably different. It was a reminder that the version of Gilligan's Island that became a television classic wasn't quite the one its creators first imagined. Number 2. Renewed, then canceled overnight. Few things sting more in television than cancellation, but being canceled after already being renewed is a different kind of blow entirely. Gilligan's Island had reportedly been greenlit for a 4th season, with the cast and crew fully expecting to return. Then, almost without warning, CBS reversed course and pulled the plug, leaving everyone caught completely off guard. The reason behind the sudden change had little to do with ratings and everything to do with network politics. CBS needed to make room for a new show backed by influential executives, and the slot that had belonged to the castaways was simply given away. The decision was made so late that there was no time to craft a proper finale. No rescue, no resolution, just the close of another ordinary episode. The result was one of television's most famously incomplete endings. Audiences had tuned in week after week, always expecting the castaways to eventually find their way home, only to have the series stop without any closure whatsoever. The abrupt cancellation became a running joke in pop culture for years, and it was ultimately one of the driving reasons fans and producers kept returning to the story through movies, cartoons, and reunion specials, all trying to give these characters the ending they never got. Number 3. The minnow was a hidden industry joke. Not every joke lands in the dialogue. Some are hidden in plain sight, right in the name of a boat. The SS Minnow, the vessel that carries the castaways to their fate, wasn't named by accident. It was a deliberate dig at Newton Minnow, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, the government body responsible for overseeing all of American broadcasting. Minnow had made headlines in 1961 when he delivered a speech to the National Association of Broadcasters and declared that American television was a vast wasteland. He wasn't speaking as an outside critic. He was the most powerful regulatory figure in the industry, the man whose office held real authority over what networks could and couldn't do. Creator Sherwood Schwartz was far from impressed, and he found a quiet but pointed way to express that. By naming the boat the SS Minnow, Schwartz ensured that the vessel responsible for stranding these characters, the one that sinks and ruins everything, would carry Minnow's name forever. Every time the theme song played and the boat went down, it was a subtle jab at the man who had dismissed television as worthless. It's one of the sharpest hidden jokes in TV history, and most viewers watching at home had absolutely no idea it was even there. Number 4. The rest sparked a fan backlash. A theme song is supposed to welcome viewers into a show's world, but for two cast members, the original version of the Gilligan's Island theme song felt more like a deliberate slight. When the series launched, the song wrapped up by naming the skipper, Gilligan, a millionaire, his wife, and the movie star, then lumped the professor and Marianne together as simply the rest. No names, no acknowledgement, just the rest. Dawn Wells, who played Marianne, and Russell Johnson, who played the professor, were understandably unhappy about being left out. Their characters were part of the ensemble just as much as anyone else, yet the song treated them as an afterthought. The omission didn't go noticed by audiences either, and complaints began to build as the show gained popularity across the country. Eventually, the lyrics were updated to include both characters by name, correcting what had always been a strange and unnecessary oversight. The change turned a small production decision into a genuine piece of TV history, a rare case where cast pushback and audience feedback led to a lasting fix. Today, most viewers don't even know there was ever a version where 2 of the 7 castaways weren't deemed worth naming. Number 8. The theme song replaced episode 1. Most television shows ease their audience in with a first episode that sets up the world, the characters, and the central premise. Gilligan's Island took a completely different approach, one that was partly creative and partly a practical solution to an unusual problem. With the original pilot rejected and no straightforward way to introduce 7 characters to a brand new audience, the producers came up with something that would prove far more durable than any single episode ever could. The theme song was written to do the work that episode 1 never got to do. Every verse introduced the castaways, explained the setup, and told listeners exactly how these 7 people ended up stranded on a deserted island. CBS accepted this as a legitimate storytelling device, essentially signing off on the idea that a catchy song could replace a full narrative introduction. It was an unconventional move, but the network was willing to try it. What nobody fully anticipated was just how effective it would turn out to be. Decades after the show left the air, people who had never watched a single episode could still hum the tune and recite the basic premise from memory. The theme song didn't just solve a production problem, it became the show's most powerful piece of storytelling. Every time it played, it did exactly what it was designed to do, introducing the world of the island to whoever happened to be watching, whether for the first time or the 100th. Number 9. Critics thought it would fail. There's a long history of television critics getting it spectacularly wrong, and few cases are more striking than the early reception to this show. When Gilligan's Island launched in 1964, the critical community was largely unimpressed. The premise, 7 strangers stranded on an island with no rescue in sight, struck many reviewers as too lightweight, too absurd, and too thin to sustain a full series. The consensus among those paid to evaluate such things was that audiences would quickly lose interest. The reviews were dismissive at best and openly mocking at worst. Critics questioned whether the show had any real comedic value beyond its basic novelty, and some predicted it would be gone before the season was out. The idea that a show built entirely around characters who never actually solved their central problem, getting off the island, seemed genuinely difficult to defend on paper. Viewers disagreed completely. Ratings were strong from the beginning, and the audience that showed up for the premiere kept coming back. The show ran for 3 seasons, and then, through the power of syndication, reached even larger audiences in reruns than it had ever managed during its original broadcast run. The gap between what critics expected and what actually happened became one of the more memorable lessons in the history of television, proof that sometimes the simplest ideas connect with people in ways that no reviewer can predict in advance. Number 10. The island was a Hollywood lagoon. There's something deeply satisfying in the illusion of a deserted tropical island, warm light, swaying palms, water lapping against a pristine shore. For viewers watching at home, the setting felt convincingly remote and sun-soaked. The reality, however, was considerably less exotic.
Almost everything seen on screen was filmed on a purpose-built lagoon located on a studio lot in Los Angeles, about as far from a deserted island as it's possible to get while still being in California. The lagoon was constructed specifically to give the production a controlled environment where weather, lighting, and logistics could all be managed without the unpredictability of a real remote location. Sets could be built around it, camera angles could be carefully chosen to hide the fact that civilization was just a short distance away, and filming could proceed on a tight schedule without the chaos that came with genuine remote shooting. For a series cranking out a large number of episodes per season, that kind of reliability was invaluable. What made the illusion work wasn't just the physical construction of the set, it was the skill with which the crew framed every shot to protect the fantasy. The palm trees were real enough, the water caught the light convincingly, and with the right camera placement, nothing gave away the truth. Audiences never had a reason to question it, and most never did.
It was only years later, when the behind-the-scenes story began to emerge, that viewers discovered the Castaways Island Paradise had been sitting in a Los Angeles studio lot the entire time. Number 11. Fog forced them off real beaches. Before the studio lagoon became the show's permanent home, producers had a different vision entirely. Early plans called for filming on actual California beaches, leaning into the natural environment to sell the tropical setting. It seemed like a reasonable approach. Real sand, real water, real horizon. What the production team hadn't fully accounted for was the coastal weather that regularly rolls in along the Southern California shoreline and refuses to cooperate with any filming schedule. Fog was the enemy. Dense marine layer would descend on the beaches with little warning, killing the light and making it impossible to maintain any visual consistency from one shot to the next. Scenes that needed to look sunny and tropical came out gray and flat, and the unpredictability of it meant that entire shooting days could be lost, waiting for conditions to improve. For a production already operating on a tight schedule, that kind of disruption was simply unsustainable. The decision to abandon real beach locations and move fully into a controlled studio environment was a direct response to those early frustrations. What felt like a compromise at the time turned out to be one of the more practical production choices the show ever made. The studio lagoon offered something no real beach could: complete control. No fog, no unexpected weather, no lost shooting days. The island that audiences believed was a sun-drenched tropical paradise was in large part a response to California's thoroughly uncooperative coastline. Number 12. Traffic noise ruined island silence. Moving to a studio lagoon solved the weather problem, but it introduced an entirely different kind of headache, one that nobody had thought to consider when the location was chosen. The lagoon sat in close proximity to a busy freeway, and the steady roar of passing traffic had a habit of drifting directly onto the set at exactly the wrong moments. For a show built around the illusion of a remote, uninhabited island, the sound of rush hour was a particularly awkward intrusion. Production crews quickly learned to work around the problem, but it required a level of scheduling creativity that added real friction to the filming process. During peak traffic hours, recording dialogue outdoors became almost impossible. Scenes would be paused mid-shoot while the sound team waited for a gap in the noise, and in some cases, the entire production day had to be reorganized to front-load filming before the roads got busy or push it later until traffic thinned out again. It's one of those behind-the-scenes realities that creates a strange mental image for anyone who has ever watched the show. The same scenes where the castaways would gaze across the water and sigh about being lost in the middle of nowhere were being filmed within earshot of commuters heading home after work. The isolation was entirely constructed, not just visually but orally. Every tranquil moment on that island required the crew to hold its breath and wait for Los Angeles to quiet down long enough to capture it.